I'm Mr. Rozansky. The last lesson was about taking sentences from active voice and putting them into passive voice. So as prophesized, this one is going from passive voice to active voice. And then with that mastery, we should be able to dip our toes into what the effects of passive voice are. Consider this the penultimate lesson on passive voice. Passive to active is obviously different than converting active to passive, but the process is similar. A nice place to start with these could be actually the by phrase, because it's waving a nice flag at, hey, this is the thing that should be the subject. So for this sentence, why not flip the script a little bit just so there's something new and put the object of the prepositional phrase as the subject, a boy named Jimmy. Now, the verb phrase is was approached, our to be verb and our past participle. So in the conversion from passive to active voice, we have to get rid of the to be verb this time, right? So we were inserting it in active voice and we would work to remove it in passive voice. So when we take it out, everything falls in line immediately with the verb because the past participle is the exact same thing as the simple past for regular verbs. So in this transition, our first sentence, we are done messing around with verbs here. We've taken the agent by phrase and just made it the subject of the sentence. We've taken away the to be verb. The past participle turned itself into the simple past form. And then we just have to add what was the old subject, not in a by phrase. It would be weird if we added a by phrase into here, but that's only in the conversion of active voice to passive voice that we have to start playing with that concept. So just put the old subject as the object, and everything's fine. In the next sentence, here I have integrated a quote as a noun that's the subject, even though the quote is an imperative command, a complete sentence in itself. Ignore that notion for now. Let's just do our thing. This time, we'll start just like last time, where we just insert the agent by phrase, the subject, that needs, or the thing that needs to be the subject in our active voice sentence, and get rid of the by. No more by. Then we have our to be is shouted, is something that we can transfer to immediately, but remember, we have to get rid of to be. Now, it's not as simple as just deleting it, because in the original sentence, is shouted, when you have two verbs working together to do something, it is the first verb that tells us number and time. So if all we did was get rid of is, we have lost the time of the sentence, and that's a miserable thing because we've gone from the present to the past. So after getting rid of the form of to be, the past participle has to change into the simple present in this sentence. Then we just take what was and make it what is. I like that. And everything's fine now. The divine feet. 6 feet of separation will be followed by all patrons of the store. We can take the object of the prepositional phrase, make it the subject, then isolating the verb phrase, caps lock is on. All patrons of this store will be followed is our verb phrase. But we know that we have to get rid of the form of to be, so I'm taking away the form of to be. Funkiness still exists, and that's because will resets the verb after into its bare infinitive form. We had that when to be was involved, but since we've removed it, we need to apply that cardinal rule of verbs after modal verbs have to be in their bare infinitive form. Then we can just take what was the subject of the sentence and put it the divine 6 feet of separation, and everything's fine. All patrons in the store will follow the divine 6 feet of separation. And then the final one of this set, the world had been changed by this set of 4 before we move to the next chunk of 4. The world had been changed by the virus. Take what was the by phrase, we can write the verb as it is. We need to subtract the form of to be. The virus had changed. Does anything need to change right here? right? Because the original sentence was the past, because had is the past, and now we are still in the past, past participle, everything seems to be fine there, very comfortable, so we don't have to change anything. And that's why the past is a very accessible way to write stories, easy to make things perfect. So now we've got a very nice rhythm down, so we can just go on autopilot. We found the by phrase, copy and pasted it at the start. We found our verb phrase, inserted immediately after. Get rid of the to be. We know with the perfect aspect, we already have a past participle, so nothing has to be changed. Take the original subject, type it as it is, and everything's fine. Except it isn't, because nothing is always that simple. We have complements that exist. We just have weird things sometimes. So as you're doing this process, you have to think of what's attached to what. To be normal, this infinitive phrase is not attached to people. So in our swapping, we got a little bit overzealous. We can't go on autopilot. People have considered chaos to be normal. And that's where, even with concepts that you think are easy peasy, you still have to think about it because a layer of complexity is always there. This next part has a modal verb, could not be conceptualized. We can copy and paste that. First, little Jimmy, before the outbreak. It's kind of like the last sentence where I put something after what will become the subject, just to see if you'll take with it, but you shouldn't be taking before the outbreak with little Jimmy when you make it the subject, because it isn't a part of it. So little Jimmy could not, we get rid of the form of to be, because that's how we convert things from passive voice to active voice. With could not conceptualize, that doesn't sound right, and it's because modal verbs reset the verb after, not adverbs, the verb after into their bare infinitive form. So to conceptualize is what we're going to want to stick with. Little Jimmy could not conceptualize oppression of space. Then the before the outbreak comes into play because it was not an adjective phrase modifying Jimmy. So that's where he belongs. And I will start my sentence with a coordinating conjunction because that's the way I did it in the original sentence, and everything is fine with that. Don't listen to what they say. With the next one, I've done another coordinating conjunction just because I realized how much I wanted to say it on video, that it's totally fine to start sentences with ands and buts and so's. It's a beautiful thing, in fact. This next sentence, sentence 7, is pretty funky. I wouldn't think of it as much as like a teaching tool, like you need to understand it, so much as watch it and appreciate that cool things can happen with language. This sentence has a lot of complexity to it, so I'm just going to put the parts that won't change, and then we'll play around with the next bit. Now, this jumps out at me as being reduced passive, because all of a sudden we have a present participle looking thing going on, and then a past participle, and then a by phrase. But there's the expectation that there would be some sort of verb here, like a form of to be. Jimmy's mind is being assaulted by an uncomfortable reality, but we can't have that because with is a preposition, not a subordinating conjunction. So I know that this is a reduced passive, and just to show you guys what can happen, even with an uncomfortable reality, get rid of this form of to be, this reduced passive, and then we have like reduced active, which is just a participial phrase, even with an uncomfortable reality assaulting Jimmy's mind. And that's just to show you that passive voice is everywhere. In the original video, I said that people hate passive voice, but they might dislike the basic forms of passive voice, but it would be so hard to write free from passive voice because it's such a useful tool. So even with an uncomfortable reality assaulting Jimmy's mind, nothing had changed for him. So the rest is exactly as it is. Nothing to change there. I just think that's awesome. Now, the final chunk of 3. The policeman was being ignored by Jimmy as he strolled into the store. We can't just go on autopilot. We have a dependent clause over here, and we're going to keep that dependent clause second at the very end. Then we'll go to the agent, the doer, the agent by phrase, put it at the start of this fractalized sentence. The by is gone, was being ignored is coming with us. The was can stay the same because the subject is singular both times, but I want to do something about the being. So I'm going to get rid of the being, but I am no longer in the progressive aspect, and that's problematic. The being was telling that this is progressive, so I will make the ignored into ignoring so that I am still in the progressive aspect, the past progressive aspect, just no longer passive but active. Jimmy was ignoring the policewoman as he strolled into the store. The next sentence, accessible as well. The policewoman was being instructed by her conscience to stop the boy, so she did. We're just trying to drive the story along at this point. Once again, you can't go on autopilot. You got to think, what is that infinitive phrase doing there at the end? And it's not attached to conscious. Go and gaff for the money that run to one of your aunt's cribs. So her conscious goes to the front, was being instructed, can come with us to play for alteration. I'm going to get rid of the form of to be. Was instructed becomes was instructing. The policewoman goes as the object of the verb because we can control C, control V, that sucker, and everything's fine, and then the rest of the sentence falls into place. That's why in this activity I realized I should have some compound sentences involved, some complex sentences involved, because passive and active, it doesn't apply just to one or a simple sentence of just an independent clause with a very basic structure. A lot of complexity can go into things. So in this activity, we've not only gone from passive to active, but we've also upped the complexity. That sentence 7 showed you that reduced passives exist. Now these two back to back, a complex sentence and a compound sentence. There are other things involved in passive voice than just a simple sentence. Let's capitalize that before we get to the last one. This one's worse than 7. So to get this answer right, you don't even have to watch this next part. You don't even have to type what I type. Type anything. That's school appropriate. And you're going to get full credit for this one because it is complicated. Cool. So we have a by phrase, and another by phrase. Now, by doesn't always signal passive voice, but we might have the opportunity to have 3 different passive voice things going on here. So let's just start with the first one. Let's just take Aries and see if it can make sense at the start of this clause, or even a phrase is what we're going to see it can be. Let's insert this verb phrase. We have a verb phrase. We know it's a modal verb, so let's just start taking everything after it that looks like a verb. If this is passive voice, which it is, we should just take away the form of to be, and everything should fall into line. If we're not in the progressive aspect, and we aren't, so it's fine. Aries must have born Jimmy, and everything about that seems cool. That wasn't the hard part. It gets hard for the rest of this. So for his reaction to him being grabbed by, why am I typing out something I can copy and paste? For his reaction, that seems like it should stay. So I'm just going to copy that and paste it. To him being grabbed by the policewoman. There's my prepositional phrase after by. So let's just take him, or I guess her, and put it at the start. For his reaction to the policewoman. We have being grabbed as some sort of verb-looking phrase, but there isn't like an is before it, just like in that previous sentence, sentence 7. There's no is being grabbed by the policewoman. But just like in sentence 7, if we take away the being, changed the past participle to the present participle, to the policewoman grabbing him, we have something beautiful. We have a sentence that makes sense. Aries must have born Jimmy for his reaction to the policewoman grabbing him. A little bit of ambiguity to who this his could be. Probably not Ares coming down from the heavens to smite this policewoman, but possibly so. It ends here, so take this story wherever you'd like. Ares must have born Jimmy for his reaction to the policewoman grabbing him could only be described by onlookers as artfully beautiful. I wish these lines were bigger. Google Forms, why don't you fix that for me? Now we've kind of lost ourselves here. To the policewoman grabbing him could only be described by onlookers as artfully beautiful. That phrase before the could, after the to, for his reaction, that's all a prepositional phrase. The subject of this sentence is actually his reaction. What I could do here is take onlookers remove the by. No one's going to understand this. Look, in this box, just type some gobbledygook and you'll get credit anyway. For his reaction, for onlookers, I'll just type it out because it's hard, could only get rid of the be, describe. Describe becomes its bare infinitive form. Describe, we can use the passive voice or the active voice. His reaction to the policewoman grabbing him. Get rid of that prepositional phrase. As artfully beautiful, and everything should make sense. Aries must have borne Jimmy for onlookers. What happened to my onlookers that I had before? Onlookers could only describe his reaction to the policewoman grabbing him as artfully brutal. There it is. Who knows if that worked?